محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. In the name of Allah, it's a great pleasure to welcome among us tonight Mr. Daniel Paul Borg and Mrs. Sheetal Patak from Project Genesis, who will be talking about the tenants' rights in the form of a workshop. After they finish the presentation, there will be a session for questions and answers. We will be moving the microphone among the attendees. They will be asking the questions, and you will just answer them. Try to answer them. Okay, nice to meet you again. Welcome, and it's all yours.
All right. I would like first off to thank Mr. Reza Bagheri, the man and the president of the Al-Khoy Foundation, and to Javad for the invitation to come this evening. It's very kind of you, and we appreciate it. My name is Daniel Paul, and this is my colleague, Sheetal. We work in the area of Côte-des-Neiges and Notre-Dame-de-Grâce with housing rights. And we were asked to come tonight and just speak on the housing rights and the issues that go around that for you here in not only in Côte-des-Neiges, but anyone that has a lease, or if you're a renter, and to inform and make sure that you have and you're respected with your rights in your housing in Montreal. Okay?
So first, just the word. Can I remove this? Oh. Hi, everybody. So again, thank you for having us today. So just to start off with a little bit about what is Project Genesis. So some of you may already know us, but just generally speaking, we have expertise in 4 areas. So in housing rights, in terms of applications for welfare, also sometimes there can be, it's gotten quite complicated to have access to welfare recently. So if there are any problems, we can help with that, not only the initial applications, but if ever there are any problems that come up afterwards. Same thing for pensions. We help people apply for pensions, but also if people get refused or they get asked for documents and things like that, we have an expertise in that. And the same thing for family alliances. Me and Daniel Paul, we are community organizers at Project Genesis. One thing that we have noticed in our individual services when we help people have access to government services is that many of these problems are not like, we can only go so far with the individual, but what we need to do is sort of change things for everybody. So in community organizing, we have some 80 members, residents of Côte-des-Neiges who come with us. We talk to politicians, we do organize demonstrations, we'll write articles in the media about what we think the government should do to improve life for people who are living in poverty. So that's specifically our mission, helping people who are living in poverty. So we have 2 committees, the Housing Rights Committee and the Anti-Poverty Committee. So for example, the Anti-Poverty Committee fights to increase the amount of welfare. The Housing Rights Committee fights to get more social housing built. And we also do a lot of referrals for nonprofits. I also wanted to mention something about the housing aspect. So Project Genesis, our main expertise is tenants' rights, but we do also help landlords. Sometimes if they have questions, we can answer them. And also in this workshop, you'll see a little bit that we talk also about the landlord's rights, because even though we take the perspective of the tenants, because most of the people who use our services are tenants, it's kind of like knowing your rights is important so that you can protect yourself, but knowing what the other party's rights are is also useful to protect yourself, because it tells you what parts of the law can be used against you. So that's it.
One of the important things to know about Project Genesis is, I'll tell you where we are right away. We're in front of Metro Côte St. Catherine. We're right in front of the Metro. Last year, which would be 2015, we saw close to 10,000 people from 138 countries. And that includes the languages that go with it. And so if people do need help and they ask for help in their language, we do our best to find a translator that will work with us to get the paperwork done in housing, welfare, and pensions. And that's going to be important issues, of course, for you and your families as well. So, we're going to start. In respect to the landlord's obligations, what are the landlord's obligations with your leases? One is to ensure a peaceful enjoyment of your dwelling. Two, to ensure that the heating is kept throughout the year at 21 degrees Celsius. Also, maintenance of the dwelling. And most importantly, of course, is fire prevention. And of course, one of the important things to know about the buildings, as you well, and are probably becoming well acquainted with, the buildings in Montreal are quite old. And so we often run into many different problems, especially within certain areas of Côte-des-Neiges that are dealing with older buildings built early 1900. And so you have many problems dealing with mice, rats, cockroaches, repairs, renovations, heating, ventilation, mold. All of those are issues that many people are confronted with in the area, but also across Montreal. If you're not from Côte-des-Neiges, there are housing organizations right across the island of Montreal. And their role is to make sure and assist renters to have their rights respected.
So those were the obligations of the landlord. So that's also those are the rights of the tenant. Like the tenant has the right to be in peace in their apartment, and all the things that Daniel just named. So potential consequences to the landlords not fulfilling their obligations. So this is what can happen. So these are also the recourses that tenants have access to. So the first one is that a tenant, for example, if their apartment is 12 degrees Celsius, they can go to the rental board. The rental board is in a tribunal where you can bring a case against your landlord. You can ask for several things at the rental board. You can ask for a rent reduction, monetary damages, so saying that this has caused me to have bad health, or living with bed bugs has caused me to have bad mental health. So the judge can accord you a certain amount of money for damages. In order to conform, is a court order that the repairs need to be done. So often, for example, what we see at Project Genesis is, and you know, I just want to mention right off the bat that the people who have the great landlords, the ones who repair things right away, we don't see them. Like tenants who are in those situations don't come to see us. So if a lot of our examples are about bad landlords, that's why. So there are many great landlords out there, and I hope that you have one of them. And so in order to conform is that there's a repair that needs to be done. The landlord is not doing it. Maybe the tenant has been living with this for a year or 2 years. In order to conform is a court order to do the repairs. So that means the judge is ordering the landlord to do the repairs. You can deposit your rent at the rental board. You can ask for that at the rental board, but also a judge can give you that, allow you to do that for a period until, for example, the repair is done. This can be quite useful because this actually hurts the landlord a lot. But just to mention that you can never do this by yourself. It's very dangerous to withhold your rent. You can only do it if the court allows you to do it. And resiliation of the lease. Sometimes we see tenants who are just fed up with their apartment and they want to leave their apartment, but the landlord will not cancel the lease. And the judge can do that. A judge at the rental board can do that. The other thing that, the other recourse that tenants have are the municipal inspectors. So there's a bylaw in the city of Montreal that lays out what condition an apartment should be in. So that means, obviously, all the things that Daniel Paul listed earlier, mold, bedbugs, all those things, are not in compliance of this bylaw. So this is you signaling to the city inspectors that the city bylaw is not being respected. And what they can do is they can issue notices of non-compliance with the landlord, or they can also give out tickets to the landlord, similar to how when you park in a wrong spot, you get a ticket. It's sort of the same principle.
The renter, as a renter, many often think that if there's a problem that they can leave the building fairly quickly, and unfortunately that is not the case. There are only certain cases where you can leave your apartment with your lease, and it's under the cases of fire, of a flood, a lack of water, or a lack of heat in the winter. It is also very risky, and there are very specific steps to follow. So you need to make sure that you consult advisors to make sure that the abandonment of your apartment is justified. But you need to be aware of potential consequences. And usually in this case, it means that the landlord would follow you through the rental board and try and recoup the monies of his lease with you. And you must remember that your lease is a contractual relationship. In Quebec, it's the civil code and the housing code, which is the framework of your lease. And it's the rental board that acts and manages, if you will, the administrative tribunal that deals with leases.
Can I just I just want to mention that when we say consult advisors, it's because Project Genesis has advisors. A few things we forgot to mention at the beginning is that we have a drop-in service, so people can come in and ask to talk to somebody about their housing situation. It's completely free, although because it's a drop-in, sometimes depending on the number of people who are there, you might end up waiting a little bit. But just to say that our services are all free.
And also to invite you, if you're interested in working in the housing area and working as volunteer, we're always looking for new volunteers. There's approximately 12 staff, and we work with about 45 volunteers from across the island of Montreal that work with the different people that we see on a regular basis. So if you're interested in housing and learning more about housing, one of the things which is important is the bilingual aspect, French and English.
To become advisors. So if you want to do the advising, we can actually train people to do that. It's a fairly extensive training. It's like 40 hours of reading and stuff, and then okay, so maybe we should speed things up. Yeah, okay. So tenants' obligations. So we talked about the landlord's obligations. These are the tenant obligations. So these are the things for which tenants can get pursued. The first thing is to pay the rent on the first of the month. So if this doesn't happen, you're opening yourself to be potentially pursued at the rental board. Maintenance of the apartment in a good condition. So you're you're allowed to use your apartment. So it makes sense that like 30 years after you got your fridge is not working as well as 30 years ago. Like that kind of problems are okay, but you can do like a normal use of whatever's in your apartment, but you can't, for example, punch a hole in the wall. That's something the landlord can pursue you for. Proper conduct in the building. You can also be pursued for things like harassing other tenants or maybe even making too much noise, those kinds of things. And respect the rules of the building. So these, first of all, like some people, some buildings have specific rules that like the landlord gives to you with your lease. So it depends on what the rule is, like because the civil code and the law around leases, around housing, are always going to be more powerful than any contract that you sign. So you can't sign away your rights, for example. So you should generally respect rules of the building, unless it's things like, for example, at some point we had somebody who came in and said, my landlord wants me to pay $50 more every time somebody comes over to stay in my apartment. So that's not legal, so that wouldn't count. But generally, it's good to respect the rules of the building. And notify the landlord of any problems in the dwelling. So for example, just so that they can fix the problem right away.
The rental board. Consequences of tenants not fulfilling your obligations. For example, non-payment of rent or frequent late payment. After 3 weeks of non-payment, the landlord can ask to resiliate or to cut the lease. He can ask for an eviction, or he can ask for a payment of rent until the end of the lease. And we've seen cases of this. We've seen certain situations where people pay their lease the second or the third of the month, or fourth, 3-4 months in a row. And the landlord has the right at that point in time to ask that the lease be discontinued. And that's very important. So the first of the month, when it comes to your leases, is very important. Monetary damages, or he can get from the rental board in order to conform.
Okay, so how to enforce tenants' rights? So the way it works to both at the rental board and with the municipal inspectors is, first you have to write a letter to your landlord, and you have to make sure that you have proof that the letter was received by the landlord. Project Genesis can help people write such letters. So you keep the proof that the letter was received, and then you can do the other things. The other things being going to the rental board, complaining at the rental board, and then etc. etc. Same thing for the municipal inspectors. Before going to the municipal inspectors, the first step is always to write a letter. So things you should remember if you're writing the letter yourself is you want to mention what are the problems in the letter. You want to make them very explicit. For example, something like the rental board, you can always go back and say, okay, my problem got worse. I want to add that to my file. You can always make changes to the file. What are you asking for? So it's important to put what you're asking for, because if you don't ask for something, the rental board will not give it to you. So if it's not in your original letter, you can't decide afterwards to add it. So that's also something important to think about when you're writing the letter. And you want to give them a deadline, because the idea is that once the deadline is over, then you will go to the rental board. So you have to tell them a specific amount of time within which they have to fix the problem. And you have to explain in your letter what the potential consequences will be if they do not do the necessary repairs in the time that you gave them. What to ask at the rental board, we talked about this a little bit earlier. In order to conform, a reduction of rent, authorization to deposit the rent at the rental board, monetary damages, cancellation of lease, authorization to do the repairs yourself and cut them from the rent. This is also something we see a lot. People feel that there wasn't enough heating in my apartment, so I had to buy little space heaters, and so they'll deduct that from their rent. So it's always very dangerous to cut from your rent, because that opens you up for being sued for non-payment of rent at the rental board. And unfortunately, the way the rental board works right now, application that the landlord makes for non-payment of rent, which could lead to eviction, gets a hearing date much quicker than application for heating or mold or anything else. So just to keep that in mind, that you want to protect yourself and not pay your rent fully on time.
How to file a complaint at the rental board. You need to have a copy of the letter that was sent to the landlord. So your registered letter, you need to keep. One of the important things when it comes to your leases is proof. When it comes to the civil code, when it comes to the housing code, you're in a legal system and you need to always make sure that you have proof. So even with the problems that go with your apartment or the unit that you're living in with your lease, make sure that you always keep proof. Your camera with the date and the time. Proof in heating is you keep a log of on the stool. You just put a temperature thing in the middle of a room somewhere if it is not heated adequately, etc. You always need to remember the important element of proof. Okay, so then you go and move on to proof of registration or reception. The application form is on the website of the rental board. And it's important to explain the reasons and the emergency of the situation. And of course, with any government department, there's certain fees that apply as you follow through the rental board system.
Yeah, things that are good proofs are pictures. But if you have pictures, you also want to bring with you as a witness the person who took the picture. Witnesses. So for example, usually when you send out the initial letter, we suggest that it's sent by registered mail so that Canada Post gives you a proof of the signature, like the landlord has to sign for the letter to get the letter. But otherwise it can also be done with a witness, as long as that witness can come to the rental board hearing with you afterwards. Municipal inspectors report. So usually we tell people to use all of their recourses at the same time. So apply at the rental board, but also apply at the municipal inspectors at the same time. And municipal inspectors are actually quite quick. So I told you before that the rental board can take some time, but municipal inspectors tend to be very quick. Like they may come and inspect the apartment within weeks, so 1 or 2 weeks. And the report that they print out, that they make of that inspection is actually really good proof for the rental board also. And just keep a documentation of the problem, like the date and the time of things. Can we look at, just to mention with municipal inspectors, they don't do everything. The rental board is a tribunal that's specifically about the lease. So anything that has to do with your lease can go to the rental board. Rent increases, housing problems, what else? Rent fixation, non-payment of rent. Yeah. So those kinds of things can also, like your neighbors harassing you, that can go to the rental board as well. But with municipal inspectors, it's very specifically about health and safety. So it's about like vermin it's a health hazard, mold, if there's not enough water, or if the electricity is cut off, or all of these things that have to do with health and safety. Those are things that the municipal inspectors can do, but they cannot do anything about a rent increase or about the fact that your landlord is other things that like for example, your landlord is coming into your apartment all the time without telling you. That's not something the municipal inspectors can help you with. It would be at the rental board. So the way we usually look at this is really, because I'm looking at the why complain thing, because it is a bit of work to complain, but it's if you've tried everything else, if you've tried the friendly approach with your landlord, if you've tried to get them to fix these problems and it hasn't worked, these are ways to sort of up the pressure, increase the pressure on them to get them to do the work that you need them to do. Should I? how to file a complaint. So same thing, you send a letter to the landlord, and then you fax a copy of the letter with the proof that it was received to the municipal inspectors, and you can also call 311 for that. The inspectors will contact the letter, they'll send a confirmation letter to the tenant saying that I contacted your landlord, and I gave your landlord 30 days to fix the problem, or whatever amount. And then, well, sometimes they do that, but sometimes they actually do just come to your apartment to do the inspection right away. It's more efficient when the tenant does follow up with the inspectors. It's just something that we've noticed, that if you haven't heard from them in a while, you can pick up the phone and say, so where's my case at, what's going on? For the urgent cases, so there's no heating in your apartment and it's minus 30 outside, or there's no electricity, or bed bugs, also are considered an urgent situation. For anyone who has had to live with bed bugs, I think you would agree that it's a very urgent situation. So you don't need to fill out a letter with the municipal inspectors for that. You don't need to give the landlord more time to fix the problem. You can just pick up the phone, call 311, and go directly to them. And they, in those situations, they'll actually act quite quickly, like within a day or two, they would come see you. Just one more thing is about evictions. So, like I said, if the rent is not paid on time, the landlord can evict you, but a landlord can never by themselves decide to evict you. So they have to go to the rental board to get you to leave your apartment. So if ever your landlord is threatening you to leave but doesn't have a court order, you don't have to leave, and if they try to take your things out forcefully, you can call the police. Again, I hope this is not happening to any one of you, but we do see things like this, unfortunately, at Project Genesis.
Just to mention on the bed bugs, last summer in Montreal we had a major bed bug infestation across the island of Montreal, in all neighborhoods of Montreal. And if it happens, or if you run it, you know people that have run into this, make very sure that the problem is contained as quickly as possible, because it spreads very quickly. We've seen, I do outreach, we visit the buildings in Côte-des-Neiges, we knock on the doors of the different buildings to talk to the tenants. Often what happens is the landlord doesn't know how to deal with it, so he moves the furniture into the hallway. And in moving it into the hallway, other children, other families, etc., they rub on it, they touch it, etc., and it spreads. It spreads very quickly. So you need to make sure that if indeed that happens, or you know somebody where it does happen, that the problem is treated as quickly as possible.
So just some final remarks. So to be persistent, to keep copies and records of things, use our tools. If you actually do feel comfortable doing these processes by yourself, we have tip sheets about everything. So we have tip sheets about rent increases, about heating, so you can just actually come to Project Genesis, ask for a tip sheet and leave. Come and consult our advisors. They're free, they're there, they're very good. You can file complaints, get involved in collective actions. We also have social housing workshops that we give regularly, about once a month. So if people want to apply for social housing, low-cost housing, we're here, and all the services are free. And lastly, unless you want,
we're open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesdays we're always closed. We're doing paperwork and catching up on the work that we have to do. But we're open. It's a free service. It's there for you. It's there for everybody within Côte-des-Neiges. And of course, we get a lot of people from outside of Côte-des-Neiges as well. And as I said, if you're interested in working on the issue, or you know of other people that are facing issues with their lease, with their apartment block, or with their building, please come talk to us. We're more than willing to help and assist and put the pressure and try and resolve the problem as quickly as possible for you.
I just want to mention what papers we have here. So this is a general Project Genesis flyer. So it has our hours and all the information about us. There are these two pamphlets in English and in Arabic and in English, which are about tenants' rights, so just general information. And we have this paper, which is shelter allowance. So it's government help to pay the rent. So it's for people who are over 50 years old, or people who have children. And if you qualify, so if your rent is sort of higher than the amount that they say here, and your income is lower than the amount that they say here, it's a maximum of $80 per month. So it's not a lot, but it can help, and not many people know about it, so we like to talk about it everywhere we go. So that's it for the presentation part. If you have any questions or comments, everything's fine.
I have one question. How about the student housing? Is it under the rental board as well or not? You can repeat it if you want. Yeah, you repeat the question.
Okay, he's asking about student housing, and he's asking if it's under leases and under the rental board system as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Here, I'll just. Yeah, it is. It's the same laws. It's the same thing. You have the right to say no to your rent increases. That you have the same rights as a private apartment.
There's also verbal leases. Some people find themselves either in rooms or in studios that they have verbal leases. A verbal lease is the same thing as having a lease. The landlord usually has to give you the paperwork within 10 days, I think. But a verbal lease, often a lot of people work with that as well.
Yeah, just to add that if you only have a verbal lease with your landlord, it is in your interest to have it written out. So even if it's been like 6 months that you had a verbal lease, you can still ask for one. It's your right to have one written out.
Second one.
It's about the temperature. You mentioned a 21 degree in temperature. If it's like say 18 or 17, are we still eligible to go and ask for making the temperature higher or damage or whatever?
Yeah, you're still eligible to ask. It should be 21. The first thing to remember is proof. What you do is you have a stool, you keep a stool in the middle of a room, the main room that you're in, with the temperature, and you keep a log, and you do it at the same time in terms of the actual log, so noon hour and before you go to bed, say 12 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night, you keep a log of what the actual temperature is for 5 to 7 days. And also you can also take pictures. They have the small electronic barometers that keeps your temperature and your humidity in your room, and you do that as well.
They come quickly for that or not? It's not urgent anymore, no?
Well, for the urgency of the situation, it depends on the temperature. So I think it's 16 degrees and up. That's been our experience, that the inspector comes slowly, more slowly. But anything under 16 degrees, they'll show up very quickly.
So a question from the ladies' side. Would you please tell us about the sublet rules in Quebec?
Mm-hmm. So there are many rules about subletting. So actually subletting is, there are two things. Subletting is when you leave, somebody else comes in your apartment and pays you rent, and you pay your landlord rent. So subletting is actually a little bit dangerous, because if that person doesn't pay rent, you could be pursued by the landlord, or if that person punches a hole in the wall, you could be held responsible. So what we usually recommend, highly recommend, is actually to do a lease transfer. And that means that the actual lease goes instead into the new tenant's name. So your name is no longer on the lease. The good thing about that is that you have the right to do that at any moment in the year. You can choose to do that, so you can notify your landlord, and he has to actually or she has to have a very good reason to refuse a lease transfer. A good reason is something like they know this tenant, this new tenant that's coming in, and they've had problems with them in the past. That would be a good reason. But like I don't like children is not a good reason. So we often do recommend lease transfers over subletting. But in a sublet situation, the rules apply in the same way, except you're still considered to be the tenant.
I want to add one thing to this also, is be very careful if you're going to co-sign a lease for someone, because you become responsible for the duration of that lease also. I can recall dealing with a situation last year where somebody, it was from their community group, they signed for the person, and the person skipped the building and the province and didn't notify the landlord, and the rent wasn't paid. The amount came out to about $17,000, and it was a major amount, and this co-signer became responsible for the payment of that lease. So be very careful if you're going to co-sign a lease with somebody, because essentially you're signing on to a contractual relationship with the landlord also.
So let's assume that we decide to sublet our apartment. Are we allowed to take a higher rent from the subtenant, for example, to cover internet fees, cleaning and furniture, etc.? And are we allowed to take a damage deposit from the subtenant?
I think my understanding, you can correct me if you don't agree with this, but my impression is that the contract between a sublessee and a subletter is not really controlled. Like there's no
something called subtenant.
Like what I'm trying to say is there are no rules, but that also means there are no recourses. So if something goes wrong, there's less things you can do about it, but at the same time it does mean there's flexibility.
Regarding the rule of building, for example, we have a rule for the no animal for the building. So my question is, for example, if I sell and the tenant has cat or dog, so what can I do? I should take a photo and take the procedure as you said, or what should I do for that situation?
So animals are tricky because it used to be legal, and then there was things happen. So right now, what the jurisprudence says is that if the tenant knew before signing the lease that no animals were allowed, if it's written in the lease, then no animals are allowed, and you can use these recourses that we talked about. But if they didn't know, if they were not notified before they signed the lease, then there isn't anything you can do. So if sometimes this has happened, like in some buildings, it's the building gets sold, it's a new landlord, and the new landlord decides that there should be no animals. So then usually what they do is anyone who was there already with animals, they'll let them have animals, but any new tenant, it would be written in the lease, and then they wouldn't be allowed to have animals. But this is specifically for animals.
So that means there is a difference between tenants, new tenants and old tenants?
Yeah, because it depends on the lease, and each lease is considered individual lease, like it's not related to the other leases. So yeah, that can happen.
Okay.
Usually also, in terms of rules of a building, you get that before you sign your lease. And that should be part of the process when you sign a lease. So before you put your signature, the owner or the manager or the concierge should provide you with the rules of the building for all leases.
Sorry, just one more thing. If there are any problems related to the animals, like there's a smell, or they're not cleaned enough, or there's, if there's anything like that, that's another story. But just for having animals would be difficult if it wasn't in the lease.
Thanks, I got your point. Another question about the elevator. So just for case it doesn't work well, so what should I do? For example, I talked to the landlord several times to say it doesn't work well. So what would be the next step for me?
The next steps would be the ones that we talked about. It would be sending a letter that says the elevator is part of the common area, it's part of the building, it's part of my lease. You have to resolve the situation. Otherwise, I will use my recourses. I will go to the rent board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming here. The last year, I requested my landlord for doing some reparations in my kitchen and bathroom. Some of them was emergency and some of them not. Just the ones that related to the pipes rotting or something like that was done. And we go to the court for the extending the contract, and on the court I mentioned this point that I want that this be done if he wants to add my rent for the next year. And the judge there told me that he can do it for you, but he is allowed to add additional 2% to your next year contract of whatever he has the cost on doing these renovations on your kitchen and bathroom. I want to know this what mentioned is really in the law, or it was the opinion of the judge, or what?
So for rent increases, usually the way it works is the year before the rent increase, any expenses of the landlord can be passed on to the rent. So yes, your rent can increase as a result of that, but the amounts are not that high. So when I say not that high, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's for every $1,000 that they spent in the year before, specifically on your apartment. So not like on the neighbor's apartment or in. It's $2.50 per month. Yeah.
For $1,000?
Yeah. For every $1,000 they spent, it's $2.50 rent increase.
So it is much less than 2%.
Yeah, like I'm not sure about the percentage. That's a little strange.
She told me 2%.
Yeah.
2% it became $20 for 1,000.
But that's the thing. It's maybe 2% for the year, but then you divide it by 12.
No, they told me. She told me that 2% of whatever it cost, then it will be divided to 12, and it will be added to your monthly rent.
Yeah. I think it's similar. Like, I'm not very good at math.
Thank you very much.
Just as you're talking, you reminded me of something. It's rent increase season. You must remember this. You have 30 days to respond, and you have the right to refuse and stay in your apartment. Okay? So rent increases are coming through. You should get a letter. The normal amounts are anywhere between $5 to $15, depending on.
How much percentage?
This year is very low.
Yeah, the percentages are very low this year because it's depending. It depends on the way it's heated, on municipal taxes and things like that. So all of these things have not really increased a lot this year. But it's really difficult to say how much percentage it would be because it depends on your building. It depends on whether there were repairs. It depends on whether like the insurance of the landlord went up and stuff. So it's difficult for us to actually tell you exactly how much percentage or amount. But we can tell you it shouldn't be $50. Like it shouldn't be very high.
1 or 2% or 10%.
Yeah, like it's not very high this year.
We get a lot of, as I said, we visit a lot of buildings, and often we encounter renters who the landlord tries to do a very quick one with the renter and does either a verbal increase or does an increase anywhere from $25 to $100 That is usually unacceptable, and in most of the cases, no repairs have been done to the buildings. So keep an eye on that, but always remember that you have 30 days, otherwise the rent increase is automatic.
Yeah, so you have to refuse it for it to not go through. Like if you don't answer, it's considered that you accepted the rent increase.
Sorry, I have one more question. If there was a background of burglary or robbing in the share area of the apartment, like parking areas or background areas or whatever, and the apartment doesn't have any CCTV on that point to avoid these problems, can we ask the landlord to do this and to protect the tenants because of bad backgrounds that it have for burglary, for having the camera there, at least that it protect the tenants?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think you can always ask. You know, there's nothing preventing you from asking. But I've never seen a law that says that the landlord has to provide that. But we could look into it for you. We could do some research and find out. Actually, if you call us, our phone number is here, and we'll just to say that Daniel Paul and I can also do some work on that. I don't know. My extension is 404. If you want to call us, we can even do it on the phone. But it would require looking through some stuff. I've never seen a specific law about that, or even a judgment.
Question from the ladies related to bed bugs. If we had any bed bugs in the apartment, who would be responsible for paying for the damage?
The landlord.
Okay, thank you.
Well, for the damage, there's two things. First thing is with bed bugs, there's the extermination. The extermination is the responsibility of the landlord. For the damages, in theory, they are the responsibility of the landlord, but in practice, if you want to get that money from the landlord, you would probably have to go to the rental board. It's not going to be necessarily automatic.
So it's protected by law, but we have to ask for it.
Yeah.
Who is going to prove it? Because there are some complaints. The landlord mentioned that you bring the trans would bring, and the trans mentioned that that is a big deal. So we have to.
Yeah, it's usually considered the landlord's responsibility because people don't really control how they bring bed bugs into an apartment. Like, you could have gone to the cinema and brought there's no way for people to control how they get bed bugs. And nobody would do that to themselves on purpose. I can guarantee that, I think. So there's usually, actually there have been decisions like that. The rental board does practically never says it's the tenant's fault. Where it can be the tenant's fault is if, for example, the landlord is trying to do an extermination. It's the tenant's responsibility to prepare the apartment for extermination. So if the tenant refuses to prepare the apartment and then the extermination doesn't go very well and the bed bugs stay, that's something that the tenant can be held responsible for, but never for the source of the problem.
Okay, another question from the ladies' part. So ladies have got a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Is the landlord allowed to prevent us from advertising online on Facebook, Telegram, Kijiji for a lease transfer or sublet or whatever?
No.
No.
Not at all.
So is he allowed to threaten us to leave?
No.
No.
Threaten
To
to
leave
kick
the
you
apartment,
out.
yeah, to kick us out.
No. I mean, that doesn't mean they don't do it. But if it's like we said earlier, the landlord can never decide that you're leaving your apartment. It's always a rental board judge that decides that. So there are things that can make it that the landlord has a good case to present in front of the judge, and then the judge can evict you, and that can actually happen pretty fast. Usually it's like a month or a month and a half. So it can actually be quite fast. But the landlord can never just say, you know what, get out. And if they do say that, you have to call the police. That's what you have to do.
Okay, let's say that a fire started in the next apartment and then it extended to our apartment and there was some damage. Who's responsible for paying for the damage?
Um, with that situation, actually that's the kind of situation where that's the reason why tenants, if possible, should have insurance, because it depends who is considered to have started the fire. So if it was because of the tenant next door, the landlord would be able to get money from that person. And also, any damage that happened to your apartment would also be the responsibility of that person. So hopefully that person has insurance, and it costs maybe what, $20 a month, right? Something like that. Like, I mean, obviously you don't have to. I mean, I think it's a safe thing to have. It's good for you, but it's also, it doesn't mean that everybody has it. Some people don't.
I want to know about requirements about noise. Is there any requirements? Because some tenants, they have family, they have children. Is there any requirements about the time or about the children's playing or not?
So yes, like noise is one reason that people come to see us, for example. And the way that works is, well, in two ways. One is you can call the police, like that's something that people do for noise. But usually that's if it was after 11 o'clock at night. But the other thing is you can't go to the municipal inspectors for that, but you can go to the rental board, and the way you would go to the rental board is that you're pursuing your landlord because your apartment is not allowing you to be in peace, and then your landlord pursues the other tenant. So that's how that works. On the other hand, I personally try to see if people can come up with an arrangement when it comes to noise, because it's like with children, you know, it's a little bit difficult to like get them to stop running around. Like I have a child, I know that that's the case. But like for example, if you could talk to them and say like, could you put a carpet, you know, like could you do something to, or could you put your bed, put your kids to bed at a certain time, or you know, like try to do something like that. But you know, that doesn't work all the time. And
so the time is 11 o'clock. Is there any specific time?
yeah, for noise disturbance, it's 11. Yeah.
I have dealt with that situation in one of the interventions that we did within Project Genesis. And again, it's proof. And 3 neighbors on the floor agreed that they would each go to the rental board with their registered letter and complain about the noise. They were within the building, and that forced the landlord to deal with the issue and negotiate with everybody, and they dealt with the issue. So it was successfully dealt with, but remember, it has to be each different unit, each lease dealing with the rental board to address the issue.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to apply at the rental board, it's $76. But it's $0 if you're on welfare. And also you can ask for that. So you can ask for the cost of complaining to be paid by the person who loses, so by the other party. So that's something you can ask for. You may not get it, but you can.
Okay. People with low income, would they receive any aid from the government toward the rent?
Yeah. So, well, the problem is there's not enough help. And that's why we have the Housing Rights Committee, which, you know, we fight for more social housing and stuff. But this is one thing, one help from the government. So it's maximum $80 per month. It's for people who have children or people who are over 50 years old. And the other thing that exists is social housing. So, for example, low-cost housing is housing where the rent is dependent on your income. So anybody who lives in low-cost housing pays 25% of their income. So if their income is $800 every month, they pay $200 per month, and then they pay, I think, a maximum of $35 for electricity and heating and stuff. But sort of, you won't pay more than that. So that's actually something that's really good to apply for. It takes time. There's a long waiting list, unfortunately, and it would be. But at the same time, it would be good to be on that waiting list because maybe a few years from now you would still be in the same situation and be very happy that you did the application. So we have almost every month a session where we help people apply for that. So people should come.
The wait is a few years? You said the wait is a few years, yeah?
The wait is a few years, yeah. Yeah.
To extend the agreement between landlord and tenant, who is the initial responsible? For example, if the tenant hasn't been informed by the landlord, is it the obligation here for the landlord or for the tenant?
So these are all like amazing questions. So yes, it's actually in Quebec we have this great thing, which is that the lease renews by itself. So if the landlord and the tenant didn't talk to each other before the end of the lease, it renews automatically. It comes back in the same conditions, same rent, etc.
This is by law?
By law, yeah. But that also means that if you want to leave at the end of the month, you have to tell your landlord at least 3 months before the end of the lease.
3 months is straight?
Yeah.
If, for example, I inform him by 1 month?
Well, the landlord might say okay. They might be okay with that.
If they refuse?
If they refuse, you have to negotiate with them. So you can say something like, I'll help you find a new tenant. I'll put up an ad on Kijiji. If you sign this lease cancellation agreement, you can offer to pay a little more, like 1 month's rent, if they sign the agreement. Like it would be a negotiation.
So, as far as you're concerned, this is the responsibility for the tenant, not the landlord.
It is, yeah. To cancel the lease.
To cancel.
Yeah, because the landlord is not allowed to choose to cancel your lease for you. Do you know what I mean? Like the tenant has that choice to say, I don't want to renew my lease, but but that also means that you have to say. And if you want, if you're in that situation, at Project Genesis we have a paper that you can bring to your landlord to sign that says that your lease should be cancelled, and we can help you with that negotiation if you want. Like we can help you write a letter and things like that.
One quick question about the cleaning the snow and ice. So if they don't clean it, should we call the municipality, or where should we call?
Do you know if that's written in your lease or not?
No, they do that, but they don't do it well. So it's their response. They accept it, but they don't do it enough.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure about that one.
No, the municipality itself is not cleaning well, so.
Oh, well, that's an answer. And they don't have inspectors for that. But yeah, so I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if that would be the legal responsibility of the landlord necessarily. But again, we can do some research for you if you give us a call.
From landlord point of view, does the landlord have
the right to say that I don't want to renew the rent with the tenant? Like, is it an obligation that as long as tenant wants to renew the lease, so the landlord has to renew it?
Yeah. Yeah, unless the rent is not being paid, unless the tenant is causing problems, like unless the tenant is not respecting their responsibilities, the lease just continues.
Like 30 years, 40 years?
Yeah. Actually, that if you stay in your apartment for 30, 40 years, that's an excellent way to keep your rent low. So we highly recommend it.
If they want for their kids, they can take it.
For kids?
For the kids.
Oh yes. No, I think a repossession. Yeah. So the question was, can landlord take the apartment so that? Can the landlord take an apartment for their children, or actually for their family, anyone in their family, like for their parents, their sister, and all that? They can. Actually, that's one legal right that they do have. So if they want their kid to move into the apartment, they can kick the tenant out to do that. But there's a very specific procedure that they have to follow. They have to give, for example, like at least a 6-month notice and stuff. So there's also rules around that.
I have one question. As we usually do not claim the damages on the wall or floor or anywhere in the apartment at the beginning of the lease, we enter the apartment. So after we are leaving the apartment, can the landlord claim that we do any damages that was before?
I think, do you want to? The landlord can do many things. Like they can try to do many things. So this actually happened to me personally. So first of all, from now on, every time I go into an apartment, I take pictures everywhere. But basically, the landlord can say, you made this happen, and I want money from you. And you can say, no, I did not do this, and I'm not giving you money. And then they can go to the rental board or something like that, but they would have to prove that you did it. So sort of the burden of proof would be on them, and like that's not a great case like for them, I think. But you would still have to, for example, you can have friends of yours come and testify saying that I went to a party at this person's place in the beginning of their lease and the floor was exactly the same. You know, you can have your own proof and they will have their own proof, but yeah, it would be, they would have to prove it. Sorry.
So this guy keeps asking questions.
No, you can ask more questions. We love questions. Although you should tell us if we should stop talking also. Like, we could stay here all night.
If the landlord complain of us and they win actually the court, there is additional fines for us or not?
So it's the same thing. Do you want to answer? I'm talking a lot. Okay. So it's the same thing as if you win in the court. It would be the same thing, which is it depends what the landlord asked for. So if all the landlord asked for was that your lease be cancelled, then all that happens is that your lease is cancelled. But usually what will happen is the landlord will ask for any money that you owe. Sometimes they'll also ask for the cost of complaining at the rental board, which is $76, I think, like maximum. Sometimes it's less than that, depending on the case. But so that would be the cost that like a judge can decide that, or they can say, for example, that because of what you did, I had to repair things in the apartment. It cost $200, and then at the rental board they'll ask for those $200. Then you might have to pay that. Like the judge might decide that you have to pay that.
Okay, Daniel, Paul, and Shital, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thank you very much for the very important information, for answering our questions.
The pleasure is completely ours. Thank you so much for having us.